models of the vehicles. I think there's a TR, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm speaking of memory, TR 643?
No, there was an MT643.
MT643?
That was in the 1997 model buses.
Uh-huh.
And the 2000 and the 2004 model buses carried the MT643R.
R.
The R meant that the transmission had what you call a retarder, which proved to be very problematic at one point.
Okay. So there's some problems in the transmission depending on the model that you're looking at. Okay. Is there a TR
263? 263R. That is in the 2006 transmissions. And once again, the R means it has a retarder.
So you're very familiar with these things, and you differ with Mr. Codrington on the reason for these repeated repairs. You are not the quality assurance manager.
No.
Is there a quality assurance manager?
Not right now.
Would you want to advise any reason as to why there is not? With the Transport Board having faced all of these issues with repeated repairs, over invoicing, delay in finishing repair jobs, long extended period of fleet units are out of service, would you want to advance the reason and make sense as to why there's no quality assurance manager at the Transport Board?
I suspect they're trying to save some money.
They're trying to save money?
Yeah, from that position.
Sorry?
From that position.
They're trying to save money?
Yeah. So the quality assurance officer right now pretty much does the quality assurance manager's job.
All right, so in your position as quality assurance officer, you're the most senior person on the job. Yeah. You're right now at Robert Street, or you've been banished to?
Yeah.
Are you still in that banished?
Banished to Spicetown.
In Spicetown?
Yeah.
I don't think Minister Jordan would want to hear you use those terms of reference to Spicetown.
I loved it down there.
Neither I suspect the deputy clerk to my left. And I agree with Minister Moore that the northern part of Barbados is a beautiful part of Barbados.
Wonderful.
Spicetown is a special place. Shouldn't feel banished, but you should continue to make your case. You are trained, you are skilled, knowledgeable in these areas, and maybe it's not my purview of business, but I would urge you not to stay silent on matters of which you can speak with authority and certainty based on your training, because it costs the country money, and people who make decisions but who are not skilled and trained do not listen to the advice that comes from those who are trained. So if they banish you to certain parts of St. Michael, just don't hold your peace on that. A couple of questions for you. There's an action plan which was formulated as a matter of response to the Auditor General's report, special report on the Transport Board. I just want to refer to a couple of matters in there to get your opinion. Would you say the board is now adhering to manufacturers' minimum recommendations, policies on lubrication and maintenance? Is the board, the operational aspects of the board's business, ensuring that you're adhering to the manufacturer's minimum recommendations for matters like lubrication and maintenance?
They're servicing the buses to time now. You would like to get a little more lubrication services in there, but that's a work in progress as we speak.
So your answer would be that there's a little bit more maintenance.
Yeah, definitely a lot more maintenance.
But there's not adherence to manufacturers' minimum requirements, especially on lubrication.
Not the lubrication, but the servicing, yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Codrington could not quite explain to us why there was no investigation triggered around the matter of the frequency of repairs. The Auditor General cited that there was a high level of frequency of repairs of vehicles, and they are in the appendices to the report. To your knowledge, is the board now ensuring that there's a mechanism in place for triggering investigations? when a bus undergoes repairs frequently?
Right now, it's a more a verbal situation where the inspectors will come and tell the senior vehicle inspector or the quality assurance officer, you're having an issue with this bus coming back for this problem over and over. And usually one of the two of them will actually, the officer or the senior vehicle inspector will actually go and check the bus themselves along with the inspector. If we find an issue, workmanship or parts, quality parts, we would usually send an email, and you'll also contact the service provider verbally on the phone, and you'll have discussion with them, see how you could get this issue fixed. This happens now.
Are you describing an informal process, or are they
No.
documented protocols?
Documented, we will return the bus, and as I said, we'll put a note in the system. This unit has been returned for whatever the issue is, and normally the inspector or the officer would follow it up to see when the unit comes back and if it has been indeed satisfactorily been repaired.
And what is happening in instances where there's a clear case of bad work? You send it to company A, and it has to go there repeatedly 2-3 times. You are convinced that it is bad work. What happens in instances like that?
Well, luckily, I have not had that instance since I came back down from Spikestone.
When that has happened in the past, what followed? Bus has gone to company B 3 times, it's come back. You see that it is bad work. Your training tells you that. What happens? What followed?
I think eventually somebody gets fed up and sends it someplace else. I don't know what then the procedures that you would have taken place thereafter with company B. But somebody will get fed up and send it to company A to have it repaired.
Would you describe the culture around these things as somewhat lax, not structured enough, not sufficiently documented, not sufficiently supervised or oversighted? Would you say it was a lax kind of an environment in which this?
Yes.
You said that to anybody there?
Yeah.
That caused you to be banished or anything?
In Spikestone, up in the north.
Down in the north. There's a policy, I'll just ask this, and I see Minister Husband wants to ask a question. I'll take a break. There's a policy, quality assurance 12, policy 11, policy 11. Sorry, policy 12, let's deal with that. It has to do with a policy in response to over-invoicing and overpayment. The Auditor General's Office had cited this. And the board should ensure that there is a mechanism in place for triggering investigate, not that one. It has to do with, it has to do with over-invoicing. The delegation of authority policy for the approval of bus repairs and maintenance and expenditure related thereto, and authorization of a payments policy. This is the quality assurance policy 12 that I'm referring to, 11 and 12. Is this in place and working as far as you know? Where there is formal authorization related to work orders and payment policy to avoid the matter of repeated payments for the same work.
Yeah, there have been a revisit of the policies, and I can't say there was an issued new policy, if you want to call it that, QA 12 on May the 23rd, 2019.
That was implemented in May.
Yes. And this is what we follow now. We have a copy of it here.
It was supposed to be implemented by September 30th, 29. You did it by May,
Yeah,
and it's being followed.
yes.
And just a quick follow-up question. I'm not sure if you would know it, but you can tell me if you do. As we'd indicated, we were told that it was the cost that led to the decision not to bring in the $6,000 reconditioned, but opted for $22,000 to $24,000 a pop to have them fixed and done a couple of times each year. And to your knowledge, over the period between the 2014 and 2017, those invoices would have been paid, or were they just mounted up as debt?
I'm not sure. I won't be able to tell you.
Not sure?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why I ask is because if you've brought in 14 transmissions, 12 transmissions, sorry, and while I counted up that there were 14 vehicles that were getting that frequent transmission change, had those been bought, it would have been $72,000 in cost for the transmission. If we assume 150% increase to ship it, I don't know how heavy they are, and pay duty or whatever it is you have to pay on it, you'd be somewhere in the vicinity of, say, $200,000. Yet, over that period, the Transport Board wrapped up a cost of $1.7 million, but said that they could not possibly spend $200,000 to bring in the transmissions and get them repaired. So that's why I was asking if the place where y'all were taking your stuff to, if they were being paid any money. And you're not in the position to.
To say yes.
We have to ask that question to another person, but it's a question that needs to be answered.
Sure. Yes, I want to ask a kind of a similar question, because I think I understood you to say that the issue was generally that there was no money. So there were certain things you couldn't do. I know that the matter of the hiring of the consultant would not have been in your purview at all in your staff meetings, because I think my memory is that at that time, once the quantum being paid to the consultant became public knowledge, people started to talk about it. So it was general talk in the society. Did that ever come up in staff meetings? Questions about not having money to do work that is to be done, but a person being hired? I mean, I'm not saying that you would have known what skills they brought and bring that along that line, but any feedback from staff to those in authority about the fact that the reasons being given for not doing things that staff members, team members thought were necessary, they were put on the back burner because there was no money. But what was termed in the society as a high-paid, a high-priced consultant was brought in. Any kind of discussion, any feedback?
It came up formally and informally throughout the whole few years that the project went on.
Was there any response as to the benefit? In other words, the question I'm asking, sometimes not everybody in the organization sees the big picture, and what may be seen as a large expenditure there may be benefits to having a larger expenditure. My question to you is, was any reason ever given for what was perceived to be this larger expenditure on a consultant when you had buses and you couldn't buy transmission, couldn't pay for the things that you thought or that staff thought would have been needed?
No.
Okay. I guess that's not really a responsive management. The next question I want to ask, did you say that in more recent times there's a service schedule being adhered to?
Yes.
Now, my question is, how is that possible given the finances? You said earlier that the main reason for not sticking to the schedule that the Auditor General pointed out, the 28-day schedule suggested by the manufacturers, was money. How is the Transport Board able to stick to a schedule at least that is less than an average of 129 days? How are you able to do that at this point?
I don't know how they work out the finances, but with the hierarchy in the Quality Assurance Department went, and we really had to plead our case and show the pros and cons of why we should service the buses more regularly, and we were successful. But the actual financing side of it, I won't be au fait with that.
It is very strange to me because it seems as though now, without a quality assurance manager, you're getting better response than without a quality assurance manager. And that's not a question, but that's just an observation based on everything that I've heard. And I would just also want to say, since this is not an inquisition, that you shouldn't see some as a banishment. You should always remember, and I'm surprised that the chair didn't tell you, but the book of Revelation was written on a place where people thought they had banished a good man too. So it's a good place, but you can also do good work in a place where you consider yourself to have been banished.
Just as a follow-up to my earlier queries with regard to the selection of service providers and quality of work and things of that type, was there a particular service provider, in your view, that you felt seemed to, for whatever reason, not be able to quite get it right, where the quality of the work that they produce was subpar?
I think the issue, I guess he's talking about transmissions. Not everyone does transmissions. So you'll find, I think there are probably like 2 service providers that are doing transmissions. I think one had more jobs probably going in than the other. But I personally had issues with some of the work coming from transmission work in general. Some of the transmission work in general that was coming out on the buses.
What do you attribute this deficiency in quality of the standard of the work? Was it because maybe too much work? Was it because they probably didn't have the expertise? What would you, I mean, you don't work there, but in your assessment, having to deal with it with some level of regularity, what would you attribute to the rationalization or the reason behind some of the poor quality work that was being executed by the company?
It may be a combination of a few things. The quality of parts, because the parts were getting difficult to get for the same 2000, 2004 transmissions. The parts were difficult to get. So the quality of parts, one thing. I assume you may have a garage that may have one fellow that's trained on the transmissions, but he may not be the one only. He may not be exclusively dealing with all aspects of that repair. So, you know, it may be a case where he does his best, but, you know, you have other persons helping along as well. So he may not be the one that actually lifts it in, make sure it's adjusted well. You know, you get the different areas, so to speak. You know, the technical expertise of all were not the same.
The transmissions were done for Mercedes buses?
Yes.
Did you have reason to have BMWs being repaired?
No.
Do you have BMW buses?
No.
Oh, sorry, my error. Just Mercedes?
Yes.
Okay.
That's as in the Auditor General's report under the heading Information for Decision Making. And, you know, it speaks to anomalies of information, inadequacy of information pertaining to maintenance costs, the cost of keeping the buses and so on the road, cost of repairs, and a number of issues where the sufficient information is not being provided, you know, for management to make proper, sensible decisions on it. I'm just wondering if, subsequent to this report, as far as you are aware, has any action been taken to improve in any way the systems, the reporting systems, the systems used for capturing information? You know, for example, it said that in the Quality Assurance Department, fully all of the information pertaining to the cost of repairs and maintenance and so on was being captured in the system. Has anything been done subsequently, or are you aware of anything that's being planned to improve that system?
As I said before, we have asked for additional functionalities to be put into the system, but there's also more checks and balances within the department right now. It's not a case where one body does one thing right through now. More rounded system, and clerk or vehicle inspector more rounded in the system as it goes on.
Is the Quality Assurance Department required to produce, let's say, you know, monthly or quarterly reports, you know, outlining the cost of maintenance and so on the system for management?
I'm not sure how it is now. I won't be the one that will prepare the reports, no. So I'm not sure. But it is, you can go in the system and pull up a report through the system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So once the info is in there, you can get the system to generate a report for you.
But is it being used, or is it being, I know you may be able to do it. From what I'm hearing, you could probably do it from the system, but is it being
But
used?
I'm not at management meetings now, so I don't know. I assume so, but I can't say yes or no for sure.
You may find this a little bit tedious, but I want to draw on your intimate knowledge of these vehicles. I'm looking at a cost of parts analysis here. The front spring. The front spring. Lord help me, I don't know what that is. The front spring of a bus. The average transport board unit. You would imagine would cost about what, approximately?
That's a good question. The whole spring, or the spring comes in leaves?
All I see here is front spring. Give me your idea what the front spring would cost, whole spring.
Whole spring, a couple thousand, thereabout.
A couple thousand.
Yeah.
What would occasion a differential in costs between a front spring obtained from Simpson Motors and APCO? What's that acronym represents what? APC or?
That is overseas part supplier.
Oh, okay. $628 from the overseas supplier. It would not surprise you at $2,266 from Simpson Motors. That would not surprise you.
No.
So what would occasion that?
When you buy it from APCO, it's a generic brand, so to speak.
Okay.
You know, you pay for the Mercedes brand. You know?
Okay. So these significant differences in costs should be put down to that.
You get that and shipping, how they bring them in, shipping. I don't know how the markups, you know, all that possibilities.
And I imagine Simpson Motors had to bring them in too.
Pardon?
I would imagine Simpson Motors had to bring them in too.
Yeah.
But some of these differences are astounding. Why would a part cost $324 as opposed to, this is a rear spring now, we're going from the front to the back. $2,324. Just the difference between a generic.
Once again, you know, if Transport Board brings it in from APCO, we used to bring in from APCO, it would be, I guess, cost for lack of a better word. But, you know, if
So
you
it'd be
bring
far cheaper.
yeah, it'd be far cheaper.
And what kind of quality difference you looking at?
Depends.
Would you be operating to a significant detriment as a board
I
because
don't-
you got the parts from APCO as opposed to Simpson
Not
Motors?
necessarily.
So why do you spend that difference in why do you expend that difference in monies that you don't have?
I think the problem was that the overseas suppliers had stopped the credit to Transport Board.
So you were paying for access to credit,
Yeah.
not necessarily for the parts, the
Basically,
value of the item.
basically.
Some of these things are quite striking. I really find it astounding. I know my colleagues saw this information and have access to it. I mean, I see an item here costs $58 as opposed to thousands as you move from local to overseas. A part here costs $3,000 as opposed to $580. Just because of the access to credit that you get on the local scene.
Credit, and as I said, you know, you have the genuine part versus generic part, so to speak.
Do we use a lot of generic part
No.
before?
Yeah.
In the period that the Auditor General report covers 2015 to 18, is it? Yeah?
Yes.
You use a lot of generic part,
Yes.
but you paid a lot of money to Simpson Motors for parts.
Yeah. It was a mixture of the two.
You ever offer an opinion on this that caused you to get banished?
No. Once I was banished, I was very quiet. Just did my work.
May I ask you where you're from, Mr.
Bank
Jim?
Hall.
From Bank Hall?
Yes.
And you are afraid to speak out
No.
and speak forth? I'm sure.
But I was living peacefully then in spite so.
Okay. Let me ask you to respond to some of these observations made by Mr. Bartholomew. the consultant that the board took on. Mr. Codrington responded to some of these. I'd like to hear your view. Mr. Bartoli said there's no visible documented procedure for determining how units are dispatched to service providers.
At the time, I would not know
You
if
wouldn't
it was
know
written,
that.
if anything was written anywhere
You wouldn't know that
at that time.
No structured follow-up on units brought back from external service providers. You're not aware of that either?
Like I say, structured follow-up.
Structured follow-up on units at the providers. The bus goes to Transtech or whoever, but there's no follow-up from the board as to what's happening.
Well, once again, the management of the department dealt with that. The general laity of the department won't have access to the service providers per se.
He also said units are sent to service providers beyond the capacity of the service providers to address the issue. You send a bus to company A, knowing well that company A doesn't have the capacity to address the problem.
As I said, I was in Spike Stone. I ain't sure how they operated it.
It didn't happen in Spice Town.
No.
Eh?
By Spike Stone, we would contact the management in Weymouth, tell them we have this issue, and they would instruct us, okay, take the bus to A, B, C, and they will forward the job sheet from Weymouth to the service provider.
All right, Mr. Codrington said that all of these observations documented by Mr. Bartol were inaccurate, incorrect. You can't speak to that.
When you say capacity, I think what I can think of is that you had a service provider who may have a lot of buses. So they tend to have a bus, for lack of better description, piling on top of one another. But eventually they're worked on. A lot of them were went and parked, awaiting the repairs.
In your capacity, whether as a senior inspector, you said?
Inspector, yeah.
Or acting quality assurance officer or manager, have you ever had cause to be involved in the disposal of a unit?
No, we haven't sold anything.
So you can't tell us anything about the whereabouts of BM 506?
No. There's not a transport board.
It's not at Transport Board. The Auditor General was told that it couldn't be located anywhere in the system. You know nothing about it.
I only know the letter that I was given and asked to take action on.
What letter is that?
Letter from a letter request of letter of transfer from Mr. Calvin Catwell.
I'm not familiar with that one. I don't think we have access to that. We don't have that as yet. Could you supply us a copy?
Sure.
Could you refer to it? Is it long? Read it first.
Yeah, sure. Request of letter of transfer. On 27th of February 2018, I purchased an old bus body, formerly BM506, chassis number AC14CK40634 only, from Weymouth Barbados Transport Board. I was asked to submit a bid, which I offered to purchase the old bus body for a sum of $300. My bid was accepted. Kindly see attached receipt, and he has receipt on to the back, in which I made a payment of the said $300 to the Revenue Department of the Barbados Transport Board. At the time of the purchase, I did not receive the necessary letter of transfer of the bus body. I have unsuccessfully sought to acquire this letter of transfer, which I was told was prepared by the Quality Assurance Manager, as is procedurally the case. In light of the circumstances, I now request the letter of transfer of the aforementioned bus body at your earliest convenience. Yours faithfully, Calvin Catwell.
So Mr. Catwell is saying he purchased the bus. He actually gave the money towards the purchase of, to the Barbados Revenue Authority, receiving the official receipt. That's what that document is saying.
Yeah,
But he had no letter of transfer of the unit,
correct.
and that letter is dated February 2018.
Yeah. The receipt is for Transport Board,
Yeah.
not the Barbados Revenue Authority.
And would it surprise you therefore to hear the Auditor General say that no account was given of the whereabouts of the bus?
Yeah, well, actually, there was talk on the ground that this bus was missing. So when I got this letter, I looked at it, and I said, well, I ain't getting involved in that. So when I checked,
You said when you got this letter?
yes, it was sent down by the acting general manager to me. At the time, I was acting
This
for
is a
insurance
copy
officer.
of a letter addressed to the acting general manager,
Yes,
a copy shared with you.
yes. You know, she asked me to investigate and provide documentation so that the correct procedure for the removal of the bus can be done. But I assume the procedure should have been done before the bus was removed. So I checked. I found out the bus was not boarded officially. So I sent an email back to the acting general
You
manager.
replied to this,
Yes.
and what? You
To
have
the acting general manager.
you have a copy of the,
Yeah.
your reply
Yes,
there with you?
yes. Good afternoon, Mrs. Sue. This email is in response to Mr. Calvin Catwell's letter to the board in relation to BM 506, request of letter of transfer. Upon investigation of this matter, no evidence has been found that this bus was boarded or that correct procedure was followed in this sale. I would like to humbly suggest that we return the $300 to Mr. Catwell and then have the unit BM 506 returned to the Transport Board's premises. Regards.
Do you know if the money was returned to Mr. Catwell?
I have no idea.
You haven't seen the bus?
No.
Well, you say you're not getting involved in that.
No, no.
So how did you respond? You just responded to the
That's what-
acting general manager with that
Yeah.
note?
Yeah.
And there was nothing after that?
Not that I know of. Not to me.
Anybody else? Mr. Trump, any question?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, just a few questions for you. In terms of the quality assurance department at Transport Board, currently how is it constituted? Is there a manager, a quality assurance officer? I'm trying to understand the structure of it right now.
There's a quality assurance officer now that's in charge. And under him, we have 3 senior vehicle inspectors, 8 inspectors, 5 clerks, 3 trainee inspectors, 2 fleet quality personnel, 1 terrierman, 5 drivers, and there's 5 contract gentlemen, mechanics.
Right. So you don't really have a manager as such right now?
No.
The quality assurance officer is the senior officer in this group?
Yes, right now.
And your position is senior vehicle
Inspector.
inspector? Okay. And during the period of our audit, which was 15 to 18, you were based in Spicetown
Yeah.
for that entire period?
Yeah.
Right. But just want to ask a couple questions then when you were the acting quality assurance officer, right? In terms of the transmission issue, you indicated that the transmissions, they're not broken down as often or as frequent as in the past,
Correct.
and you attributed that. I'm just trying to understand what you have attributed that to. Is it better quality of work, more improvement in finances, better maintenance regime? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I would say better maintenance regime because we instituted a servicing procedure on the transmissions, where you change the filters, the fluids, that sort of stuff. We also changed to the recommended Allison transmission fluid, Transyn. We started to use that as well as part of the procedures.
Right. So a question for you, because the issue of transmission and the frequent repairs went on for a number of years. So the question, why wasn't something like this sort of considered before? In other words, the Transport Board, well, the Quality Assurance Unit, kind of look at all the type of issues, sort of identify exactly what the problems are, to try and see if you could come up with a strategy or plan so you won't have such frequent breakdowns?
It should have, but I can't tell you that it was done.
Okay. So in terms of the whole issue of the maintenance then, what started it or what triggered that so that you have proper maintenance now and that has basically stopped the slide to some extent?
Well, when the hierarchy left, the basic premise was that, with these young boys, everything will fall down. So we pretty much had to hit the ground running. And, these were inefficiencies that we were observing for a little while. So we started to put things in place to try to see if we could slow down and then eventually halt the deterioration and then look to build the fleet. So we put different procedures in place, and here we are today.
Okay. So as it is now, how many buses do you have currently?
Between high 60s, they're about high 60s.
And the numbers are pretty steady?
Yeah, steady high 60s.
So in terms of looking at historically, we also had a problem with engines. So the issue that kept the buses off the road, was it mainly transmission, engines, what?
They're a combination of both. What we started to do in the department, little things matter. So it was a lot of maintenance in terms of intercoolers and radiators or chokes. We did a lot of cleaning those, and it's an ongoing process. It's more rigorously followed now. More maintenance, a lot more checking. You see a bus and the belts don't look healthy, you change that at the same time. You don't wait for it to go and pop. You change the belts to pop. You change it at the same time. And we're trying to gear more towards preventative maintenance as opposed to repairs.
And you think that has paid off?
Pardon?
And you think that has paid off big time?
Yes.
In terms of the back to the issue of transmission, just to clarify something here. In terms of how many people do you have that would used to repair transmissions?
Two
persons?
Two service providers.
Right. And in terms of ranking them and in terms of cost, for instance, is the same cost per transmission?
No. The cost, one service provider provided his own parts, and one got parts from Transport Board. I can't tell you exactly how much the labor was on both, but I know one had the parts from Transport Board and one service provider provided his own parts.
So in some cases, Transport Board actually sourced the transmission themselves?
Yes.
So when they sourced the transmission, what was the cost of the transmission, the typical cost for one?
A rebuilt transmission, somewhere around the $6,000 mark, thereabouts.
The one that Transport Board sourced?
Yeah.
Right. So I suppose this question will be asked you many times, why didn't you use that method more so than the other ones that cost
But
4
I
times?
wasn't in
I
the
know.
decision making at the
I
time.
understand.
But we were told it was a case where the overseas suppliers had stopped credit.
Okay.
So they were using the local supplier at the time.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I think that's all I have to ask. Thanks, Chair.
We can get those bits of correspondence from you, so we
Sure.
can have some copies, but I would appreciate that. Any others that you have which you think may be of relevance, to help us to derive a fuller understanding of what happened in Transport Board in the period? Any other questions, anybody? Yes, sir.
No.
We appreciate getting in so we can make some copies, and want to thank you. I don't think the panel has any further questions for today, but just to advise you that we may find need to have you come back, in which case we give you adequate early notice to that effect. And thank you for coming, and Mr. Graves for accompanying you today. When we conclude the meeting, there are some refreshments downstairs. You're invited to partake of that, to share further moment with us. And thank you, Mr. Graves and Mr. Chairman. Folks, I don't want to come back to this business. I suspect you don't either for the rest of December, do you? I know you ladies get ready. You don't want to come back here the rest of December, do you? So I would suggest that perhaps we could adjourn without a set date. Without a set date, and we can come back sometime in January. We'll give you quite adequate notice to that effect. All right, we can formally have a motion that we adjourn then, unless there is something else anybody wants to raise. Yeah, Minister, you so moved. All in favor? I hear no serious objection. We're not going to attend that anyhow, so we're adjourned. Yeah.